All right, today we're diving into something really cool. We're going to look at the world through the powerful lenses of sociology to try and figure out, how it all actually works. I mean, have you ever just stopped and wondered why our world is, well, the way it is? Why do we have things like families or governments or money? And why is there so much conflict? These are huge, massive questions, right? Well, sociologists have some pretty powerful ways of tackling them. Think about it this way. You wouldn't try to build a whole house with just a hammer, would you? Of course not. And it's the same thing with understanding society. It's so complex, you need a full toolkit. For sociologists, these tools are called theories. But honestly, a better way to think about them is like different lenses you can look through. Each one shows you the world in a totally unique way. So, let's grab our first lens. This one tackles a really fundamental question. I mean, with billions of us running around, all doing our own thing, how does society not just, completely fall apart? What's the glue that holds it all together? This brings us to a perspective called functionalism. It's one of the OG theories in sociology, and it sees society not as this big chaotic mess, but as a really intricate, complex system, kind of like a machine where every single part has a specific job to do. The best way to get this is to imagine society as a living organism, like the human body. You've got your heart, your lungs, your brain. They all have very different jobs, but they have to work together to keep you alive and healthy. Well, functionalists see social institutions like family, the economy, the government in exactly the same way. The function of the family is to raise kids. The function of schools is to educate them. Each part is doing its job to keep the whole social body healthy and running smoothly. And they have a pretty clear-cut method for analyzing all this. It's basically a four-step process. First, you identify all the different parts of the social system. Then, you figure out what kinds of problems that system is facing. Step 3 is figuring out what the system needs to survive, its system needs. And finally, you analyze how each one of those parts we identified back in step 1 helps meet those needs. See? It's a pretty logical breakdown. Okay, but what if society isn't this smoothly running organism? What if all this talk about harmony and stability is kind of missing the point? This is where we need to switch to a totally different lens, one that looks at the world and asks a very different question. Why is there so much conflict? And you can see the clash right here. On one side, you've got functionalism, all about order, integration, and meeting needs. And then, bam, on the other side, you have conflict theory, which completely flips the script. It's all about inequality, tension, and change. It's not just a different view, it's like looking at a whole different world. So here's the absolute key to understanding this lens. For conflict theorists, society is basically an arena where different groups are constantly fighting over resources. We're talking money, power, status, you name it. A classic example, the tension between, say, factory owners who want more profit and workers who want better wages. For conflict theorists, that kind of struggle isn't a bug in the system, it's the main engine that drives all of history and all social change. And this whole thing kind of works in a cycle. It all starts with one core assumption. Every social system has inequality baked right into it. That inequality naturally creates conflicts of interest and a lot of negative feelings. Now, if a group feels things are deeply unjust and they can get organized with leaders, ideas, and resources, well, that's when you get conflict. And that conflict can lead to a major reorganization of society. But here's the kicker. That reorganization often just creates a new set of inequalities, and the whole cycle can start all over again. Okay, let's pause for a second. We've seen society from these two massive bird's eye views. First, as this giant orderly system, and second, as this huge contested arena. But both of those are what we call macro views. They're all about the big picture. But what about, us? Where do we fit into all this? And that question brings us to our third and final lens. This one is completely different. We're zooming all the way in now. We're taking a magnifying glass to our everyday, moment-to-moment interactions to see how we actually build our social world from the ground up. This perspective is called interactionism, and its core idea is that society isn't some giant structure that was just there before us and that we get dropped into. No way. Instead, we are the ones who are constantly creating and recreating it every single day through our interactions. Think about something as simple as a handshake. It's more than just two hands touching, right? It's a little ritual, a shared symbol that creates a social bond. We're literally building reality moment by moment with every conversation we have. One of the giants in this area, George Herbert Mead actually laid out how this all works, how we even develop a self in the first place. It's a fascinating process. It starts when we learn significant gestures, like language. That's the key, because it lets us do something amazing, role take, or imagine the world from someone else's point of view. That skill allows our mind to develop, our ability to think things through and rehearse our actions before we do them. Then, we start to see ourselves as an object, the way other people see us. And all of this, all these steps, eventually build up to create the self, that stable idea we all have of who we are. So, there you have it. We've looked through 3 really powerful but really different sociological lenses. Which brings us to the big question, doesn't it? Which one should you use? Which one is actually right? Well, the truth is, none of them. At least, not on its own. We don't tell the whole story. Think of it like this. Functionalism shows us society as a body. Conflict theory shows us society as an arena. And interactionism shows us society as a constant conversation. Each one reveals something absolutely crucial, but it also leaves other things in the dark. Each lens highlights one part of reality while putting the rest in the shadows. And that's really the final thought I want to leave you with. If every one of these amazing, powerful theories is really just one lens, just one way of seeing, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are we not seeing? What crucial parts of our social world might we be missing entirely?